Hey everybody, good morning, happy Monday. Finally, I'm able to actually just focus on Julie Juice and my current thought process when it comes to the vaccine schedule and what it actually is reflecting. Not so much that it's actually the cause, but it's actually a reaction to, and then all of the different strains that are out there and antibodies that are left unchecked. So yeah, this morning was kind of crazy for me, and I had to take care of a lot of different things. And you're going to find that when you get everything healed and sealed and your brain is working the way it's supposed to, functioning on all different levels, you're finally going to, things come to surface such as just anything, and you will figure out how to deal with it when life kind of takes a funny left turn. And it's not going to be a big deal. You're not going to freak out. You're going to deal with things as they come. And this is called adulthood. This is called life. Some people stick their head in the sand and pretend it doesn't exist until the world blows up in front of them. Other people, well, yes, they will go and be OCD about stuff, but yet their health is not on par. So you see that not everybody is 100% aligned in being proactive in every part of their life. Okay, so don't let somebody's financial situation make you think that they're doing better than you when their body is actively decaying. Okay, when you know you are healed and sealed and well balanced, when you finally have all areas of your life taken care of proactively, being addressed, and you see a resolution and you see a specific outcome. And so I'm in the process of actually getting all of my worlds and my duckies in a row, not only my financial health, but my physical health, my mental health, and everything else. And that comes with not being afraid to face whatever things that you may have ignored in the past and they may come to surface. Okay, and that includes also your health. So this, this adulting thing that everybody talks about, well, it also translated into your health. It also translated into your body. It translates into every single aspect of life. Okay, and so I actually am really excited at the fact that I get to face all these different things that I probably would have freaked out a couple of years ago. And it's not as bad as I thought. And I'm not going into details of what it is I'm talking about, but just know that you will have the strength and the wherewithal to deal with whatever comes your way, no matter what it is. Okay, so yeah, if your financial health and your mental health and everything else health is wonderful and you're proactive, then now let's get your physical health to be 100% on par, where your body isn't saying that you're not proactive when the rest of your life says that you are proactive. So if your bills are paid, your taxes are paid, everything is done, you're up to par, you're in agreements with all of your different creditors and different people, that's wonderful. Now let's get your physical health to be reflective of how you run your life. If your life is really, everything is well balanced and aligned. So that's what I'm in the process of doing, and it's pretty awesome. It's pretty cool. So there's my little 2 cents on where I'm at. So that's what I'm doing, is taking care of knocking things out left and right that I forgot about a couple of years ago. That's reminding me, oh yeah, we got to take care of this. Okay, let's do it. Let's take it on. And I'm in a good position to take those things on. So anyways, enough of that. But this whole thing with the vaccine schedule that you guys have heard about, and you saw me cover this very, very briefly a couple of days ago or even yesterday. Well, yeah, this is just more of the confirmation as I'm looking at all the different mutations of these diseases that are out there. And it doesn't surprise me that we have so many different strains of influenza, so many different strains of the rotavirus, or so many different strains of HPV or Hep B or DTaP or PCV, or all these different vaccines that are required. It's not because the CDC and biotech is trying to poison you. No, this is reflective of humanity sticking their head in the sand. They allowed agglutination to happen with all of the antibodies that have been left unchecked, okay? And so why is it that every single generation, as you see here, seems to have more and more and more diseases? It's not because they are discovering and creating, which we all are conspiracy theorists are thinking, the anti-vax people are thinking that, oh, they're just trying to poison you with all this, right? No, now let's take a look at it from a different point of view. Let's look at all these antibodies that are left unchecked, okay, from viruses that have been shape-shifted and mutated because people are not taking care of their bodies. They are allowing these antibodies and the mutations to go totally unchecked, and then they have children. So when you have children, guess what? Those viruses, those antibodies, those mutations mutate. And that's why you have now 24 different strains of measles. So we were speculating in the conspiracy world, the anti-vax world, that, oh yeah, biotech, they're being really, really crafty and creative. And in order to make money, they have to create new diseases to then create new medications and create new other things. Well, what would happen if it actually is not that isn't so at all? Try this on that maybe it's you guys that are all mutated, ignoring the signs of your body, that you have major duress, you have mutations and viruses, and then you're taking all of these different pills, powder, supplements, and procedures in the allopathic holistic who don't know any better either because they're only reacting to what you want. And then your diseases are mutating and shape-shifting. And then guess what? Y'all have kids. And when you have kids, guess what? Kids come from mutations. So guess what? The kid gets a conglomeration of all these antibodies, these natural immunities from mother's breast milk, and of course the father too. So now you're putting out more of a cauldron of these pathogens and antibodies and mutations and whatever. And now you have this major cluster mesh of biochemistry that is now as a result of all these new diseases, such as now childhood Alzheimer's, all these rare diseases that you guys are seeing, as well as so many different strains of the same disease. Guess what? That's because humanity doesn't know what the hell they're doing, and they're ignoring the signs, and they're taking all of their pills, powders, and supplements, and they're creating more antibodies, which is then going to create more crazy strains. Hey, guess what? What are co-infections? When you have HPV and HIV, Lyme disease, and what is it, Elam-Guillain, or whatever those different diseases are, and Guillain-Barré, that's what it is, Guillain-Barré disease, and all these different offshoots and strains. And hey, why couldn't it be your fault? And the industry is just reacting because they don't want the population to get decimated by patient zero, who happens to have a mutated type of virus that no one has ever experienced before, because of just so happens that both the parents created this child that had this disease, or somehow that disease, all of those antibodies and mutations, then elicited a specific virus that now you're seeing in the population. Okay, so what is agglutination? Is when all those antibodies come together, coalesce together, and it creates another type of virus. And it could be a very different virus. See, that's what goes on. So we're finding out now with Jilly Juice is that you actually can dilute those antibodies to when you get that titer test, you're going to come up most likely negative if you do the titer test before or after J juice. If you're doing a bunch of J juice and you do a titer test, you're going to see your antibodies go to where it could be possibly negative. So if you guys want to show that you have some kind of protection, we've been talking about that you go get a titer test right now before you do J juice, because you know you're pathogenic now, full of antibodies, and you go see what you're positive, and that'll tell you the potential of you creating another disease out there. And imagine everybody in your immediate vicinity, everybody in your town, all produced a titer test, and everybody can see what it is that you're carrying inside of you, what pathogens, because they wouldn't allow you to travel to that native island in the middle of the Atlantic, because you would basically decimate the population with how many pathogens you're carrying. So now you get everybody in your family and everybody in your community to go and divulge what's on their titer test. You can see who are the ones that are extremely pathogenic with a lot of antibodies testing positive for all the different diseases. So when you see that one article about this guy with stem cells that was able to cure the AIDS virus, well, yeah, because guess what the virus is? It's a bunch of antibodies. So many antibodies present, it created a virus. It created this inflammation. So when somebody has the AIDS virus, guess what? They're deteriorating. But then all these different cures where they're lessening the antibodies, diluting it in some way, using stem cells, which are only temporary. They're lessening the antibodies, but they haven't got to the root cause. Because when you take somebody else's stem cells, the body's immune system, when it gets strong enough, is going to purge out those foreign objects. So you're back to square one. So, and then you still haven't really changed the core fundamental, way of life and way of thinking. So you're still going to do the same thing. Maybe you might do a few superficial changes of your diet, but you still have the AIDS antibody. No, it's not the AIDS virus, but if you still keep with your practices, yeah, those antibodies, as your body starts, degrading, those viruses will come to, or those antibodies will actually multiply, because the more that you're taking of negative elements to keep those antibodies at bay, the more that it creates more natural killer cells, and it'll create another kind of crazy disease, or it'll just shut down the mutations that are the weaknesses that you already have, shut down those major vital organs with mutations, and then that's how you would die. I mean, this doesn't surprise me. So when I'm looking at the whole thing with the virus, viruses create antibodies. I mean, you'd think that that's like, common knowledge, but you don't realize this, that when somebody does, they cure themselves of the AIDS virus, they're not HIV negative. They're HIV negative if they don't have as many antibodies, because the number, so the positive or negative, what reflects positive and negative when it comes to titer tests and when you're positive or negative for a disease is based upon how many antibodies are present. It's not that they disappeared the antibodies. It's not like, the AIDS antibody never disappears if you've ever been exposed to the AIDS virus. It never disappears. So if you've ever been exposed to AIDS, you will always have the antibody. But the virus is what people are worried about, because that's when you have so many antibodies present that agglutinates. So here's this thing, just so we can look at how this is understood. Okay, so here we go. How you can be clear of a virus. So here we go. Viruses create antibodies. You can be clear of a virus, but still hold the antibody. Too many antibodies creates virus particles to stick together, called agglutination. Okay, so how does the immune system make antibodies? So this is for people that just don't know how to Google. So this is how you Google. So how does the immune system make antibodies? Now, when you actually put in just whatever keywords up there, then they give you sample questions of which answers they provide you based upon the community. Okay, so then there's question that's a sample question that there's an answer for. How does the immune system make antibodies? Immune cells called B cells make antibodies. A pathogen such as a virus is a large molecule. So a pathogen such as a virus, and it could be any other like bacteria that's pathogenic, anything that is not friendly to the body is pathogenic. And that's also antigen is pathogenic. It's called contaminant is pathogenic. Pollution is pathogenic, okay? So a pathogen such as a virus, so that's an example, is a virus, is a large molecule with different components called antigens. When a B cell recognizes an antigen, it is activated and interacts with other immune cells to receive directions. And so it creates antibodies. Okay? Those antibodies then multiply and they go after that pathogen to neutralize it. And that's how your immune system works. And that's the whole point behind the vaccine industry. So when you get new diseases that are coming up because people are so mutated and they stick their head in the sand and they're not taking care and diluting of the antibodies and they're full of pathogens and mutations, guess what? We have new diseases and we have different strains of the same disease Go figure that. So it isn't the CDC or biotech that's actually doing it. They're just reacting to the ignorance of humanity. They're not creating this shit. Believe me, I guess we gave them too much credit. Because guess who is in biotech and the pharmaceuticals? It's your mom, dad, sister, and brother. It's not some of this being up there on the top of the rock that says, okay, I'm going to create a population and brainwash a bunch of people to then create all these pathogens and pretend that we need to protect humanity, and we're going to then create a school system that's going to cater to that line of thought of conspiracy. Yes, the Rockefellers and the Rothschilds are so advanced that they can have all this forethought to know how to create this whole conspiracy of let's destroy humanity. So then they can live in what? Live on this earth by themselves while all of you guys are dead? No. It's all reaction to the ignorance of humanity. So then I said here, okay, what are antibodies and what do they do? Now, there's another sample question that is available on Google when you put in keywords, okay? This is how you Google, guys. Viruses can also be removed from the body by antibodies before they get a chance to infect a cell. Antibodies are proteins that specify or specifically recognize invading pathogens and bind and stick to them. Secondly, many antibodies can work together, causing virus particles to stick together in a process called agglutination. Causing virus particles to stick together, called agglutination. That's basically reinfection. Secondly, many antibodies. So it's called balance, guys. You see, when you have too little antibodies and you're exposed to a lot of pathogens, then that's human immunodeficiency syndrome, because you're not creating enough antibodies to go after those pathogenic particles that are destroying good tissue. But you have too many antibodies working together. Guess what? And it's causing virus particles to stick together. So then what happens is when there's too many antibodies, it turns into the thing that you're trying to work against. And then I can see where we have 24 different strains of the measles. You see how this works? And then it mixes in with different biochemistries that then make it a different strain. And then that's why they're requiring everybody to get vaccines for the different strains. And why people who have been vaccinated still get sick, because we have so many strains of these diseases and viruses that mutate and create different ones, and that's why people are getting sick. So that ought to scare all of you that are not doing Jilly Juice, because if you're not doing Jilly Juice, you're going to be very pathogenic. Yeah, you'll go and do your little detoxes, you'll do your little pills, powders, and supplements and think that, okay, yeah, I'm doing a detox, I'm doing cannabis, I'm doing all this stuff. But guess what you're doing in the allopathic holistic industry? You're creating more antibodies for then the already said mutations in your body and the pathogens in your bodies and the antibodies in your body to then mutate into a different disease. And guess what? You are a carrier of some probably exotic disease that you may or may not infect somebody around you, but you will actually pass that down to the next generation. And this is why we see the vaccine schedule get so long after each generation. So you see right now we only have records from 1962, which is basically all the kids from the 1940s. Okay? So the kids, or the vaccines for 1960s is based upon the kids that were brought up by people in the 1940s, 1930s and 40s. So there wasn't that many diseases because they weren't that pathogenic and they weren't mutating. But then, oh God, guess what? Then the people in the 1980s are the kids from the 1960s. Guess what? Okay, guess what? Now you have, in my generation, we start seeing that my parents have more diseases. So that's why they gave the 1980s kids a bunch of vaccines, because they saw mutations from their predecessors. The parents who reproduced, they reproduced from mutations. And guess what? Now you have a longer list of vaccinations, because that's a longer list of mutations based upon humanity sticking their head in the sand. And then you see 2019. So everybody that I grew up with had a bunch of kids. Everybody in my high school, and even people in my high school are dying at a very young age, but they're having mutated children. And guess what? The mutation, this is a reflection. This vaccine schedule is a reflection of the mutated kids and from the parents of the Gen Xers. And now we're worried about Luke Perry types where you're going to die from a heart attack because you're not taking care of diluting those antibodies. And so, yeah, cardiovascular disease, strokes, and heart attacks are going to be prevalent for all the Gen Xers that don't proactively dilute the antibodies. So what's going to happen is you're going to have agglutination, which means you're going to have either the same disease or a different strain of it, and somehow, and then you'll either pass down to your child who's going to have some crazy mystery illness. They're like, where did this come from? Both parents didn't seem to have this disease, but somehow this kid has this new disease. Oh, people are going to blame the vaccines. Maybe not. Maybe the kid, maybe in combination of the child's mutations from the natural immunity from the parents, and then the exposure of the newly vaccinated kids, as well as kids that didn't get vaccinated, but they've been exposed to other vaccinated kids. I mean, it doesn't even matter how you get the pathogen. The fact that you got the pathogen from your parents or from the environment or from other kids, now you have a tinderbox, a Pandora's box full of mutated viruses that will be these crazy new mystery illnesses that we're going to see in, like, I don't know, what is it, 1962 to 1983? That's like 6, 7, like 20 years. Then we have 83 to 2019. It's another 20 years. So the next 20 years, this list is going to be longer because guess what? We're going to have more mutated kids, not because of the vaccine schedules, because humanity doesn't take care of their mutations and they're having children at the same time. Hello, Edith. Okay, so be very aware of agglutination. That's when all the antibodies stick together and then either reinfect you because now you have another virus. And then also, too, agglutination will happen when you have other antibodies that you get from the environment and from your biochemistry and from your parents and from whoever else. And it's going to turn into another mystery exotic disease. Okay, so, hey, Masa. So this is not telling you that the CDC is poisoning you. No, this is a reaction to humanity sticking their head in the sand. This is not an intention. This is a reaction. This is a reaction. And so if you are telling your friends not to get vaccines, they're going to be exposed to this no matter what. So guess what? And they're already at a disadvantage. If you have friends that have babies that obviously came from Gen X mothers who are very mutated, because this vaccine schedule tells you how mutated the mothers are, because that's what they have to do to make sure the babies are okay, that they won't die from these diseases. So if you tell someone not to get a vaccine and they're already mutated at a disadvantage, it could potentially kill them. So no matter what, whether you get a vaccine or exposed to someone that did get a vaccine, regardless, they need to do Jilly Juice. This is why you have to get off the anti-vax approach, because you're leaving those kids that are not doing Jilly Juice majorly open for some major complications, and that they will blame you. Because when you tell someone don't get a vaccine and they don't get it and they still get some crazy disease that was preventable based upon a few antibodies to help protect so they can assimilate to these new diseases, you don't want that on your conscience. Do you really want that on your conscience? See, this is where you have to understand how the immune system works. And now we're discovering, with the viruses and how they mutate and agglutination within the antibodies all stick together, and then you have more exotic diseases. And this is why the vaccine schedule gets so long, because humanity keeps creating more diseases because they're not taking care of the mutations and they're having children. You're having children from a mutation. When you're breastfeeding your child, guess what? You're passing along all of those antibodies to that child, and that child's already in an environment with people who may not care about their body, who may not do any kind of practicing of really, really good health. So they're completely pathogenic. So no matter what, you have zero control over your environment. And so yes, Moss is going to get a titer test on the 25th. Good for her. So that way she can see exactly what she's working with and see if she's negative somewhere, that there may be a requirement for proof of antibodies for who knows what. But at least she will have, at least she'll know. She won't have to get any more vaccines. Even if she comes up negative, she won't have to get any until that's required. But at least she has the records to show that she is positive for whatever it is that could potentially be required. And maybe it could be, and here's the thing though, guys, the flu, okay? Because there's this whole legislation coming up of them mandatory vaccinating people because of the flu. And it could be a requirement to get your driver's license, a passport, to travel, who knows what. You realize that people who don't take care of their bodies and who are not doing jilly juice are going to create another flu strain out there. And that is a possibility that we're going to have 50 zillion strains of the flu. Now, are they going to require to get all of those strains? But hey, every year, if somebody is mutating a flu virus because they're not taking care of their body and they're leaving their antibodies, they're just kind of ignoring their antibodies and not really taking care of themselves, and now they have a new flu strain and it gets discovered by the CDC, and then it becomes a required vaccine for the following flu season, do the J juice. I don't know if it's going to come down to forced vaccination, but it may, given how fast we're on this death trajectory of mutations and people sticking their head in the sand. This is why you really have to get everybody around you to understand how all this works, because this is not going to get any shorter. And you know what, Congress, if they see that this becomes an epidemic because people are sticking their head in the sand and they're not fully understanding how to reverse these mutations, and we can't force people to take care of themselves, then yes, we're going to have forced vaccinations. We're going to have a long list of influenza every year that you're going to have to get a flu shot for. It may come down to that. Be prepared. So you can get a titer test today, but doesn't mean it's going to stop the strains that they may require you to get a flu vaccine for down the road in the future. But hey, it's good to see where you are now, just so you have an idea. But you're not going to know from one day to the next. So, get the titer test just to see where you are in case it does come up this first round. Because who knows? I mean, they're saying in 9 or 10 days are going to actually vote on this. And then who knows when it becomes law, if it ever does. But now you have recourse, but there's no way to mitigate the potential of new viruses being created because of mutated humans. And those may be a requirement in the future. But you can't predict that. There's no way to predict that. So really, truly, it's not the CDC or biotech's fault. It really is you and your neighbors and all of your belief systems are at fault. Okay? So, well, here's the thing, Masa. It doesn't even matter, because even though you get a vaccine, if they're mandatory, people who get a vaccine and are shedding, they're already spreading it everywhere. So it's not going to be any different. You may be getting a more severe form of the virus from some mutated person that's shedding from getting the vaccine than if you were just receive the vaccine to begin with on a strong jilly juice body. See, so it's just like, I wouldn't even worry. I wouldn't even go there, Masa. I wouldn't even focus on that. I would not even focus on a nosedive. No, humanity won't take a nosedive, because no matter what, even people who are not vaccinated are still getting in contact with these pathogens. It's not like these kids are in a bubble. They're mixing in with the community. Okay? So now it's understanding that how you can counter things that you can't control because you live in a public world. You don't live in a bubble. You don't live in a bubble. So now it's education on how to dilute the antibodies so they don't agglutinate and turn into something else, and then it doesn't cause imbalances in your cancer or candida or in your hormones. Okay? It's all about balance. Too little antibodies and too much antibodies cause issues. You got to have the balance based upon the conditions in your environment as well as your belief system and practices. There is nothing inherently wrong with the vaccine schedule at all. It just shows you that humanity, you can't legislate morals. So it shows you that, yeah, these are, you can blame, you won't even know who to blame. There is nobody to blame. If somebody is completely mutated and they're sick and they're aging, yeah, then you can blame them. So it means you got to blame everybody, even yourself, until you reverse the aging process to where you are not agglutinating and creating more new viruses and shedding. If you truly want to blame the people, blame the very unhealthy people who are creating these mutations to cause then a vaccine to be created. And now that's going to really piss off a lot of people, because nobody's like, oh my God, I'm aging, I'm mutated, I have all these different diseases that I'm dealing with. And that means everybody that takes cannabis, everybody that does the pills, powders, and supplements and detoxes, and in the holistic allopathic industry, they're all to blame for why we have this vaccine schedule. So if you really want to blame somebody, blame the people in the system for creating this, not the system itself. But so let's not even go there. So let's not blame anybody. Let's just educate. Because if you start blaming everybody around you, you're not going to educate. You start blaming the system, blaming the vaccine schedule, you're not educating. Okay, so you can get a titer test today, but it's not going to speak to 10 years down the road when we do have a mutation in some of these flu strains to where it's going to warrant you to take a vaccine down the road, because they're looking at public health. And you're part of our society that is part of the public health. They don't know how healthy you are. They just know that they need to have everybody show that they have some kind of protection. And if you have a strong body and you can take on a pathogen that you may get in the subway or you may get through a vaccine, either way. Either way. And so, yeah, this is going to piss off all of the pro-reproducing people, because, yeah, when you have kids, you're creating children from mutations, which is going to create exotic diseases. See, when we say, oh, yeah, these little germ carriers, these kids are like little germ bunnies or whatever, it's not exactly too far from the truth. Children carry a lot of disease. They carry a lot of pathogens. They carry a lot of mutations. First of all, they're growing up. They came from a mutation because both of their parents have antibodies and a lot of pathogens. Not because they're vaccinated. Even if they weren't unvaccinated, they have a lot of pathogens because the mothers have a lot of pathogens. They're in a society where there's so many pathogens. Okay? So it's not the vaccine's fault. It's the fact that humanity has stuck their head in the sand, and every single time they reproduce, they create another generation of new diseases. Hence why we're reacting and having to vaccinate people, because people are dying from preventable illnesses. And you can say that NBC and Business Insider, when they're focusing on the tetanus and the measles, these kids, that one kid cost the system like $1 million in tetanus, the tetanus protocols to save him from tetanus, when he could have gotten the vaccine. I mean, they say you have to get tetanus every 10 years, but you know what? If you have a strong body, taking in strategic nutrition, you don't necessarily need the vaccines, and so it's not going to really matter. But if they are requiring people to get vaccines based upon what they think is a public health issue, then yes, you have recourse. You have jelly juice, or you can try to do a titer test to see if your exposure already in your environment will give you that. Yeah, I know what you mean by with the overabundance of antibodies. I get it. I get it. But what I mean is already with the overabundance of antibodies, I know 12-year-olds with, yeah. Well, then they could actually petition not to get those vaccinations. Remember, when they're doing forced vaccinations, there are exemptions based upon what's going on, and that's up to your doctor to decide. They go and look at your titer test. They go get a titer test. They go get tested to see if they can handle extra amount of antibodies. And if they can't, then they get the exemption on that, massa. It's not like they're forced to vaccinate everybody regardless of their medical situation. No, it's people that can handle and could afford the antibody acquisition. But yeah, if you're autoimmune disease, or you're cancer, or you're dealing with some major life-threatening situation, you're not a candidate. And there are stipulations. There are things that when you do take a drug that they say, have you been recently vaccinated? Because if you have, then you're not a candidate for this drug. So there are going to be, exceptions to the rule. But you and me, massa, they're going to require, because guess what? We can go get a titer test and see if we've been exposed to it. And if we have, great, then we're home free. But if not, then yeah, we have to go get the vaccine. But I'm not going to worry about it. I get the vaccine. Yeah, it's going to suck. And then guess what? I'm going to drink a bunch of J juice and heal from that initial mutation, from that exposure. And then now I'm protected. But I mean, it's not like I had any worry about it, but it's just what they're doing. They're being proactive, I guess, because they know people don't take care of themselves and they're already at a weakened state anyways. And so, yeah, if they were exposed to some really aggressive disease, it could potentially destroy them. That like just no different than receiving an AB positive blood, all that antigen, right? So a pathogenic person on a person who happens to be like an O negative, which is a person that's never received that specific type of antigen, it could potentially kill them. It would clog up and thicken up their blood. So it's the same thing when you look at when you're looking at blood type incompatibilities to somebody that's never been around a very aggressive disease and they're already at a weakened state, they wouldn't be able to handle that exposure. So then that's why the vaccines are there, to then kind of pave the way. It's a weakened, attenuated virus to give you a few antibodies, a few layers of protection. You may still get symptoms, but they would not be as bad. See, now I sound like a freaking pro-vaxxer, and that's not what I intended, but now I understand. And that's what the doctors are there to make sure that if they do recommend a vaccine for someone that has an autoimmune disease, or they didn't recommend, they just force it on you, and then your kid really had a major reaction or they died, that's when you get a titer test to say correlation equals causation. That's where the correlation equals causation would really be really appropriate. And that's what the slush fund is for those people who want to sue the vaccine industry, because the doctors weren't doing their due diligence to make sure that their patients were a candidate or were not a candidate. I mean, that's why the doctors are there, to make sure, and it's not like they're doing any kind of preventative, as far as health, but they're trying to at least prevent you from dying, okay? That's all. They're not trying to prolong your life. They just don't want you to die today from some disease that could be prevented. And so, yeah, I would never ever think that I would act like, a pro-vaxxer. But here's the thing, Masa. Even if the government was on board with prohibition back in the 1900s or 30s or whatever those days were. Okay? They didn't like alcohol because they saw that alcohol destroyed families and destroyed businesses and destroyed people, destroyed communities. But guess what? You can't legislate morals, Masa. So even if the government and the CDC said, hey, everyone should do J juice, look, they said everyone should get vaccinated. Look what kind of a backlash they got, because people didn't understand. So it's not about which the government would understand J juice, because the government understands what destroys people, but people don't understand what destroys themselves. So you're dealing with ignorance. You're dealing with people that don't even understand even how their own bodies work, much less with the government understanding how all this other stuff works as far as J juice. Okay? You can't force somebody to understand something that they're not willing to understand. So now you have to find ways to meet in the middle somewhere. So that's why then it comes all the way back to full circle. Doctors have a place to make sure that you are a candidate for some of the treatments, so that way you don't die. But then, hey, the rest is up to you. They can try to recommend, hey, you should eat vegetables, you should eat this. But people don't do that because they're all full of parasites. They're all mutated. And you can't make them be healthy. You can't force them. Especially you can't force anyone to do J juice. That's why I'm not in jail, because nothing is antibiotic. There's nothing antibiotic in my juice. That's why my juice isn't dangerous. But people don't want to deal with pain. So when someone doesn't want to deal with pain, then guess what? They're going to be taking antibody acquisition type of stuff, and it's going to compound and mutate into then new exotic diseases, and then you got to deal with it. But hey, so really truly, when we have most of us on J juice, we know who to blame. We'll blame the mutated people for creating these crazy diseases. We'll blame the elderly. But do we really want to go there? We don't want to blame anybody. We want to educate. But you'll see who it is that is potentially creating a tinderbox. People who are mutated, having children, are creating kids are going to have more exotic diseases. Now we're seeing juvenile Alzheimer's. No, you can't force someone to vaccinate, apparently. No, you can't. If somebody is not a candidate, then they wouldn't qualify. Okay? But I mean, if it comes to public health, I mean, I don't know, there has to, I mean, they'll get a titer test. Or who the hell knows? They haven't even gotten there yet as far as understanding how J-juice works. If you're on J-juice and can prove, but see that we haven't gotten there yet. So at this point, we just have to understand that nothing is forced vaccinated yet. We're not there yet, but there'll be a tipping point. The more that we tell people not to vax, the more people are going to want to vax, because they're seeing now people who are not vaxxed falling victim because of their already compromised body anyway. So it doesn't even matter if they don't vax. It doesn't even matter because of the mutations that are being created from reproduction on mutated bodies. Okay? So it's like we got to come from this from a different angle. It can't be just straight up pro-vax, anti-vax, whatever. It's about J-juice and education. Because at this point, we can blame everybody in our town for all of this, not the CDC or the biotech. I know it's a very sobering thought. Believe me, I never at all anticipated that I go there, but I was planning to write some stuff this morning, but I got caught up in other business. So I figured I'd just do this transmission and kind of get my head somewhere in this. And then tomorrow morning, when I don't have any kind of interruptions, I have everything figured out. I put out all the fires that I did this morning, so I'm all good. So I'm going to get myself in that mode to go over my book. But I wanted you guys to just kind of hear my 2 cents regarding agglutination and viruses, and then the mutations of the different strains. Okay? Yeah, Masa, just save yourself. You can't save anybody but yourself, and whoever wants, just be the example, Masa. Don't spin your wheels on anyone that's not worth really, because believe me, it's a wasted energy trying to convince somebody. It really is. That's why I've stopped. That's why I only say, hey, if you want to know my thought process and you want your questions answered, then go get the book, because it shows initiative. When they get the book, then go get, give us the receipt. We'll send you a login and password, and then you go and figure out how to work the system in my website. And then you ask the question. And then there you go. And then those that are really, really, truly wanting to, they're going to put their money where their mouth is. They're going to put their energy where they believe in. Thanks, Masa. You also help too in all of this, okay? Proud of you too. But yeah, I mean, really help only those that want to be helped. Everyone else, hey, whatever. So that's why I say no matter what, we are untouchable when it comes to the system and their requirements. We are actually the free people. The ones that are not free are the ones that are so worried about everything around them that they're begging somebody to stop doing this because they don't have any power. When you have to beg someone to put forth legislation so that way you're not in danger, you're asking your master to allow you to live when you actually hold all the cards of life. That's the difference between a slave and a free person, is when you understand the formula of life. You don't have to ask somebody to live. Yeah, love you too, Masa. All right, so I'm going to go do my thing and eat some food, and then yeah, and do all that. And you guys just have an amazing day. Drink the J juice. Don't be afraid of it. Okay, if you guys have sent your receipt, just wait for Lillian to reply back, and she will. She'll probably reply back tomorrow or later on tonight. And just read the book, do the J juice, and drink it, and then schedule your waterfalls accordingly. Okay? All right, I'm going to go upstairs, do my thing, but you guys have a great day. Thanks a lot for listening. I'll talk to you later. Bye.